Hello and welcome to Tribe of Humankind. We're here to talk about the spiritual evolution of our species. We're here to check in with our viewpoint of what we see happening on the planet Earth, where the collective consciousness is moving, and what part we play in co-creating our future and our reality. I'm happy to have Clara joining us again today, along with Lex and Mano. And I'll turn the floor over, let them introduce themselves, speak to what is new in their last week of life, and a little bit of what their connection is with me in this conversation and why they feel it's important to be here and be talking about this. So we'll just offer that in the introductions, first a 2 to 3 minute hello, and then we'll get started on the next part. Whoever's ready, go ahead.
Hey everyone, it's good to see you all. It's nice to be back on with another recording. I'm doing well. I just feel myself feeling like introspective and reflective today, and this week has been just figuring out my next steps, moving back to Toronto and see what that would be like. Looking for housing. And hanging out with some friends in Florida, just saying some goodbyes. And so it's been like a sweet, sour moments. Just finishing up some project that I'm working on here. It feels good all the way around. I think that's a little bit about me at this point. I'll pass the mic on to the next person who wants to go.
Didn't realize you were moving back to Toronto, heading back to Canada, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I can stay here longer, but I figure if I get back there, I can start focusing on my school, and just get the ball rolling.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Ladies first, Clara.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I'm integrating at the minute from the past few weeks, actually. So the reasons why I've not been on for the past episodes was because I was away twice. Once in the Alps of southern France and then back in the UK for a weekend. And both trips had really intense days that they brought me and intense experiences of initiation. And now this week has been the first week of being home again without having a trip waiting around the corner. So it really feels like I'm rooting back into my home and into this space and into the questions that come with coming home. Like, how much is this my home? Like, how long do I want to stay here? Where will I go? Because I've been tuning into the energies of the other lands, especially with the UK as my husband's home and the place where I feel most at home myself. So there has been a lot of contemplation about potentially moving back, and if so, when, and all of that in combination with these really intense experiences. It's a week and a time of integration and slowness as well in that process. So that's going on in my world right now.
Awesome. I got to read your newsletter on Glastonbury. That was well done, well written.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
I've had a totally manageable week, an equal amount of good and bad, which is pretty good going. So I'm buoyant, I'm happy. I've managed to, I live somewhere on the coast of England. There's not that much chance of bumping into like-minded people here. And somehow, I sat down, I've been doing this stuff where I try and talk to my field, program my field, and I've been experimenting with that and for a couple of weeks, and I've had serious results, like obvious results. And so one of the things that happened was I managed to meet somebody in the area, and then I met 10 people in the area, and now I'm part of 2 groups which are in this area where there's 250 people. And yeah, so I'm kind of excited about this. Seems to be a real thing you can do, you know, the law of attraction and stuff. For me, what I've done is I've decided to call it, I give permission, right? So I don't like, I want to win £1 million, £1 million is coming my way, or any of that stuff. I say I give anyone that enters my field permission to be conscious, or I give anyone that enters my field permission to love and be lovable, right? Like, I'm trying to find my own sort of ways to do it and stuff like that, but it's really working. Like, it's not like my perspective has changed. It's like people who are not even emotional in the last 2 weeks, one of them said, "Love you." And that, like, I was like, what? That, it was like, you know, like, so anyway, so yeah, so I'm really excited about that sort of stuff. Yeah, I probably should end there, but yeah, I'm kind of excited.
That's exciting, Lex. Even especially the part about opening up so much more community. You said 2 different groups. That's like accessing almost 250 people. Wow. All in the last week or 2 or something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in less than 7 days, really, if I'm honest about it, because I was learning how I was going to do it. I was working out the exact way I wanted to speak into my field. And I only kind of I only said, okay, this is good, I like this, about 7 days ago. And so I started doing it straight away. And yeah, like instant results, not, I swear, not perspective, not imagination, actual results, which is, you know, I'm excited.
Wow. I'm excited too. That's a big deal. Networking with that many people and meeting that many new people in a place you already live is a big shift in quality. Yeah, I think the networking needs to happen whether we know what we're doing with it yet or not. Like the more we can, yeah, mycelium network ourselves to other humans across the planet, I think is going to aid in our ability to grow in the directions we want to. All right, beautiful. Thank you for the introductions, everyone. And now, just before we go into any like heady topics, I just want to take 1 more minute to pass the mic again to have everyone do what I like to call hosting ourselves into presence and just speaking to anything big happening in your maybe emotional or psychological field in the last week or so that's really present in your mind, and that maybe would do well to speak to before we get into today's conversation. If there's something that's like, health concern or relationship or big life change that's in your lap, that's holding on your attention right now, that if we speak to it, it might bring us all closer together on the same page before we get started on our conversation. So I'm just going to offer that out, and feel free to share what's feeling most real and alive inside you.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. Don't mean to be like a heavy thing, but for some reason in my field, the resonance of like a death and transition has been like a very present. So since I've been here, my cousin's dog passed away. That was like one of the first thing that happens. And like a few weeks later, my uncle's brother passed away. And then 2 weeks ago, um, my cousin's ex-husband, so my second cousin's father passed away. So there is this constant loop of this, like a death and transition, like within my like a direct field. So that's been a really fascinating factor, and not to mention me sitting with the ceremonies. That's also like a lot of old aspects dying. Me cutting my hair, transitioning into something new. Now choosing to go back to Toronto by fate. Like it's I'm in resistance of it, but every sign it's like no, you got to go back. Uh, so surrendering into that and evolving into whatever growth that's showing itself. So a lot of that has been very present, and yeah, learning to tap into this field of my own intuition and creativity and the different layers of awareness that are present, and to be able to pull myself through the bottom ones into the top ones. Yeah, this ebbs and flow of the consciousness as it shifts through the days, and I'll tap more into that throughout our conversation. But this is something that's been very present in my reality.
Yeah. When you say going through the bottom ones into the top ones, what are the bottom ones and what are the top ones?
When I say the top ones and the bottom ones, top ones being like a super conscious, super connected, in tune with my feelings, my emotions, at the same time being in tune with the collective. So as I travel to the bottom ones, it's almost like blocking everything and just kind of like a shutting everything off, because whatever the story may be, and oftentimes the story is that it's too much. I can't handle it. Rather than asking for guidance, like asking God or Spirit, can you give me the strength to face what I need to face? And yeah, so I do notice that I go through that ebbs and flow, like when I'm in the lower states of consciousness, not being as mindful as I normally would be, not being as sensitive either to my feeling or to the feelings of others, um, maybe not showing up as my best self, like just little things, but over time, seeing these repetitive patterns, I question, how does this happen? How do I still show up as my best version of myself? And that's something I was reflecting before our call. Like I was doing a little meditation, and I was just noticing this piece of the puzzle was very present within me. Yeah. Does that help to answer, or does
Yeah,
that resonate?
it does. Give some more clarity on what you mean there. Thank you. Thank you, Manu.
That's something that's wearing me down at the moment, is not being able to show up as me. It's not that it's a conundrum, because like I met some people, as I was just saying, I met a new group of people and I met them today, and there's a lot of things unfolding and a lot of people who are transitioning through different ways of seeing the world, or some people might say levels of consciousness. And the only way to connect with people kindly and to create rapport and to actually sort of feel them is to be where they are, I find. And so I find myself sitting at tables with people and shutting off 90% of what is happening in me to be able to, for the rest of that, a small amount of me to be able to be a match. So, you know, people that are just finding out about certain aspects of reality for the first time, you know, it's like, what's the best way to put this? It's not, it's like, it's almost like you feel like like a teacher and a student kind of relationship. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just mean that sometimes you just want to hang out with other teachers. That's something that, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm probably using the wrong metaphor, but it has to do for now. I want to hang out with people who are like, equals, and that sounds awful. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of at the moment I'm sort of like, it feels like a grind. And when is everyone going to show up in the same way? When is everyone going to, and we can all have the same conversation. One more thing, I know I'm talking a lot, is that each people are in different places, and so everybody's conversation is almost like everyone's in different universes. It feels like I'm traveling fucking universes all the time when I'm speaking to people. Oh, which universe am I in now? Oh, which universe am I in now? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I just want to go home. I want to be in my universe. But
And your universe is able to kind of like connect or easily move between those other universes. Like it doesn't spin you to be in this one, this one, this one, or this one, because yours kind of encompasses all those. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or?
yeah. And I don't mean that in a sort of, oh, I'm so clever kind of way. I really don't. It's not like that at all.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the membrane that separates these little micro universes from each other?
I guess it takes a lot of time to put all the pieces together and to do the self work and to clear away all of the things that don't need to be there, to be this rushing energy of consciousness and genius that is playing with what it sees with a wide perspective, and it takes a really long time. It's like one of those games where they show you one bit of the puzzle at a time, and it's not until enough have been revealed that you know what the whole picture is. And everyone's sort of like got two pieces or one piece, and it's different pieces. And so anyone that sort of did all the pieces found the way to put the time in, if that, whether that was through it takes a lot of time and energy and effort and input. Like you earn it, don't you?
So when you do the self work, what does it equal in that? Like how does that equal? How does that like break down the membrane so that you can see more or whatever? Like what's your understanding of that? Just so that we can help us all be on the same page as we're listening.
Okay, so for me, the best way I'd say it is that conspiracy theory, religion, psychology, politics, all these things, there's this massive amount of unnecessary, distractive, purposely put there stuff that takes a really long time. And if you are lucky, if you can just see the core of it, then you can do it quite quickly. And then you can see the core of all the things, and then you see how they relate together as one sort of connected story. But until people do that, are guided to do that, or just accidentally find the way to do it, they remain confusing, disparate, separate things that contradict each other. But actually, if you can work through them in the right way, they're not contradictory. They're actually all part of the same tapestry. And then once you've got that far and you see the tapestry, what's really strange about that is that what the picture is, but everyone you meet is aware of one part of it, and you have to check out, well, which part of this picture are these people aware of, because that's all you're going to be able to talk about with them comfortably.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I think what's alive for me right now is a question of place and language, and who I am in relation to the place I'm in, the country I live in, and the language I exist within, or the culture I exist within. Something that comes up very regularly. I feel like it's usually about after a year of me being in the same place, there is some kind of ping that goes, move on. And I've been here for almost 3 years now, so the ping is getting louder and louder. And I think for me, it's really alive. Like when I travel, is really, especially when I travel back to England, I feel like I'm existing within 3 different countries. For me, it's England, it's Sweden, and Germany. And Germany is obviously my country of birth and my native language, but it's the one I feel at least at home in, both the language and the country and the culture, which is still fascinating to me. And there is something coming alive for me when I'm in England and in Sweden, and when I'm speaking English or Swedish, something else comes alive. And that's something I'm playing with at the moment. I'm playing with this question of who am I in all of these places, in all of these languages, and which place, which language actually serves me best for my journey, and also for being of service. So it's really, yeah, that's a question that I'm playing with and toying with a lot at the moment.
Where were you before Germany?
England.
In England. Mm-hmm. And I mean, do you notice, maybe for yourself, friends, or others, like, what do you think about like all the movement of like, I know I've been moving a lot lately, like Mono's transitioning, like, I think a lot of people in our circles, or I don't know, this society maybe is a lot more transient than it used to be. And like, not just traveling, like moving, relocating, changing, and like, I don't know, do you have any perspective on the why?
To me, it's a lot about this interaction between the land. So I feel like there was a lot for me, a lot of remembrance for me in England, a lot of me coming alive, like aspects of me coming alive. And it was the same about coming back to Germany, was about making peace with the land and with the culture. And it was on an energetic level, in some ways, work I had to do. It was like this out of the question thing of I need to go to certain places. Also, the need to return to Germany there was something on an energetic level that made me return in some way, because of open books, of things to be resolved, of things to clear up and to work through. And it's like almost this exchange of me and the land. So it feels like the land is giving something to me, but I'm also giving something to the land. And that's something I'm exploring. So, and with that always comes the question of, to what extent is it just my comfort that brings me to a new place, and to what extent is it an actual exchange, an interplay, almost like a dance with me and the land I'm moving to and going to. So yeah, I'm really curious for me personally, to explore these reasons of why am I drawn to certain places, or why do certain places call me in for reasons I don't logically understand.
There's a type of communication going down that's involved with your personal growth.
Yes, definitely.
Would you say that's been happening all the time on the planet, or do you think that's something that's speeding up, or something that people are becoming more aware of, or what's your understanding of that?
I think from my perspective, it feels like something that's definitely speeding up, simply in terms of the possibility of moving around that we have now, that like our grandparents' generation simply didn't have. So I feel like there's definitely speeding up in that sense. And I do also feel like that there are many who become more aware of the influence that the environment has on them and the country. So it almost feels like there is that's just my perspective of how it feels, but like a kind of openness towards these factors that have been ignored for a long time. And the land as consciousness, I think, and the openness toward land as consciousness is something that is coming online for more and more people, I feel.
I agree. Yeah, Lex.
I heard somebody say something really interesting, and as soon as they said it, I thought, wow, that feels really true. They said that sometimes mystical people embed the land or buildings or trees with information that can be received, in the future, because they couldn't write it down and know that it would be safe, and they couldn't keep it in the culture. And so they got to the point where the only way to keep it safe was to literally energetically imprint it into places. And so some people, when they quest around and they go to places, the theory is that they're literally going to read the energetic imprint of that was put there,
Mhm.
which I liked. I thought it was interesting and beautiful.
Have you ever found that to be like have the land or the place or like a ley line that seemed to like really activate you, or like create, do some type of opening for you?
Well, just before COVID, I had this knowing, and I'd gone back to being an ordinary person. I'd said, right, I can just be ordinary. This isn't going anywhere. I'm just going to be ordinary. And then about a year before COVID, I just started to get reactivated and totally like, you're gonna have to get going again. And it got to the point where everything dissolved, my relationships and where I was living. I let it all go, and I went and lived on a campsite. And in my mind, I'd been to this campsite, and I just kept dreaming about it. So I went back there, and I had loads of synchronicities, which, like one of the caravans had the force is strong in this one, and all of the caravans were like dare to dream, and I don't know, like everything seemed to be like almost set up. It was almost like a stage. But when I got there, and I don't do the angel numbers 1111 all that sort of stuff. I say, well, it happens every day at 11 minutes past 11. But my phone switched off at 11:11 as I pulled up to this campsite. And so I plugged it into the charger, managed to get a bit of charge on it, walked into the campsite across this boundary, and it made a noise that it never made before. Like a noise, like to the point where I went, what? Like my phone made this weird noise. And I walked around the campsite to pick a spot. And as I walked back past this place, it did it again. The phone made this really weird noise. And I ended up in a conversation with the guy who owns the campsite. And he said that the week before, a man had come there who was writing a book about ley lines. And he said that that was a ley line.
Whoa.
Right. And I could go on, but essentially, I felt like I literally chose to pitch my tent on a ley line. I drove quite a long way to get there. And not only that, but when I got there, it was almost like a set had been like it had always been arranged. And not only that, but my phone made a weird noise twice when it went past the over the ley line, what this guy said was a ley line, and my phone switched off at 11:11. It just, I don't know, it just seemed like a lot was going on there. So I spent 10 weeks there and had a load of downloads.
Wow. It held you there for 10 weeks, huh? It like
Yeah.
attracted you to, you're like, hey, I gotta hang out here a little bit longer just to love it. So how about you, Mano? You have any experiences with like the land calling you to a place or activate, feeling really attracted to it? You stay longer than you planned, or change your life after you went there, kind of thing?
All the time. It happens all the time. It's usually I don't tend to understand it, why it's happening. And usually it's different. Like I feel this calling at times, and if I listen to the calling and if I show up trusting, and then everything falls into place. And when I don't, the universe has a way of pushing me into a situation, into a place. Um, so when I first came back, I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna finish my shamanic work here, and then I'm gonna go back to Vancouver, where I have like my community established and things like that. But in the ceremony, what came up was like a relationship with my father, how I had to go and take care of all of that, like finishing that chapter of my book. Um, and part of me was like, okay, I'll work through it within myself. I don't necessarily need to be there in person, this and that. But somehow the universe has a different plan. So until I show up there, I don't know exactly what's waiting there for me. But the community that I chose to go to, I was only planning on being there for one year. I ended up living there for 3 years. And that was just so like perfect. Like everything worked out the way it's supposed to. And I was shown, okay, you have to leave. Now it's time to leave. And it shows up in like a different forms. Sometimes it's a communication that comes through an elder. Sometimes a certain level of discomfort. It's almost like there is no more growth. It's like you've plateaued out here. Okay, time for your next evolution. So I definitely feel like a different calling for me, it's really about answering that. And it does require a certain level of sacrifice, knowing that everything I've created, I have to let it all go. It's almost like you cannot have attachment in a way. You're a monk, but you get to live a regular life as a monk. At any given point, you just drop everything and just go on with your next task. And the person that gives you the task is this higher being, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So, you know how people always say when you choose to incarnate to this earth, you come with the plan, like you have your own agenda, like you even coming to the earth alone, you volunteer to be here. And for me, it feels like it's a volunteer I already volunteered to be here, but even within that one contract, there's already all these like a subcontracts,
Right.
which I think, okay, this is the contract I'm doing. I guess I'm just going to play this out. But then no. Within that contract, there's more contracts. So it's like you got to get all these done. So it's been a fascinating journey for me. And when I, complete something and then I sit back, either I go, just sit in a meditation for 10 days or I go sit in a journey and then I look back at everything and then I just starting to see how all the puzzle pieces just fit together perfectly. And that creates a layer of contentment. I'm like, okay, I get it now. That's why it had to happen the way it had to happen. And of course, the level of growth, the knowledge, which is preparing me for the next evolution, whichever that might be.
Mm.
Yeah, it's full of surprises.
I like it. So like when you're there, it's not always clear what's going on, but sometimes further down the road, as you look back, it starts to make a little more sense. And while you're in those ley lines, maybe it's like an elder, or you said someone will come in and share something with you. So there's like lots of, maybe like Lex said, there's like synchronicities happening. It's like not only is the land doing something interesting there, but like the energy that land attracts brings people with messages or meetings that inspire or change your trajectory. And
yeah, all the time. It happens like all the time. I always question, how aware am I of what's happening? And I think this is kind of relates back to what we talked about earlier, the different level of consciousness that we're tapped into at any given moment. Someone could be looking at their phone and they say 333 and they'd be like, okay, oh, cool. And then like maybe one of us is looking at 33 and all of a sudden like, oh my God, it's 333. Oh, what the universe is trying to tell us, it's just that kind of a reaction.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Clara, I'm curious, what do you think, what's the communication from the earth doing for us? Like why? Like what's the earth trying to communicate to the humans?
Oh, that's a big question. I think there is so much going on at the same time. I think for me, it feels like it kind of connects into what Manu just said there about this questioning, how aware am I, and how aware are we as a collective as well? Because it feels like the layers of potential communication and the layers of potential messaging and information that comes through from the earth to both us individually and as a collective is, to me, feels like something incredibly vast and full of potential. And I, for myself, feel like I'm very aware of how unaware I think I am. Like, to me, it feels like there is so much that I am not aware of and I cannot yet see. And it's this interesting knowing inside of me that it feels like there is like this knowing that there is so much unseen of wisdom and information coming through, like from the earth. And even though I can tell that there's so much there, I'm not in a space where I can consciously perceive most of it. And it feels like it's a very humbling place to be. And at the same time, it can be a bit of a frustrating place to be, because I feel like it's almost like the sensation of there's so much potential to be tapped into. And even though I feel like I can access only a fraction of it, it's like, it feels like there lies so much potential for what we as a collective and individually can tap into the future. So it feels like there is a whole other way of being and communicating with the earth that is literally waiting for us to activate within us and within the within consciousness. So
it's like patiently like trying to communicate something large, and it's just waiting for it to be received by the humans. That like
that's how it feels, almost like to me, as if there is something that isn't even asleep at all, that is really like this loving patience of awaiting to be seen, to be recognized and interacted with. And I feel like there are more and more people who actively try to tap into it. And it's like, to me, it's like, just when I see myself doing that, it's like now when I went to Glastonbury and with this really intention of like communicating with this place and space and really wanting to tune into what the earth has to say in that particular place. And I feel like it almost feels like me being there and trying to do that is almost like me being like a small baby that is just trying to find his way and can't really crawl yet, but you're kind of trying and going like, wow, I can sense the potential of what or we as a collective might be able to do one day. And yet it feels like really infancy as a collective in that sense. So it feels like we're tapping into something, and there's so much potential in that, but we're still, we're really infants, we're really babies in that sense, learning it. That's how it feels to me. That's just my personal perspective.
do you feel like there's urgency to it?
Yes and no. It's like, it feels like in some way, I feel like there is more urgency for, I don't know, what comes up for me there is this feeling like that we can prolong our suffering. That's the words that just come up there. It's like, it just depends on how long we can be bothered to suffer in the end. That's how it feels like to me. It feels like the earth and the communication itself, that's something that is patiently waiting, and there is no rush. And it will all happen in its divine timing, and yet still feel that we have, it's like, it's really this interesting thing of, it feels like it's a choiceless choice. It's something that we can choose to speed up, and yet at the same time it will happen at just the right time. It's like a paradox.
Right.
That's how it feels like to me.
I mean, I definitely resonate with like a lot of what you're sharing, just especially the infancy state, going into the medicine, experiencing all these like beautiful realms and the potential of humanity itself, and then coming back out into the world and feeling like disappointed. I'm like, there's so much we can do. Come on, people, how are you not seeing this? And then I try to have a conversation with my colleague or something, and they'd be like, bro, you're too deep. I'm like, I'm just saying, like, it is. It's almost like I feel like a pull. There's almost this like a gravity that just pushes me toward. Perhaps teaching different communication skill that we can bring into our day-to-day. It's almost like a knowing that I've tapped into certain level of consciousness, right? And I want to share that with the others so that the others can experience it. And by doing those types of like a baby steps, like infancy learning to crawl, like teaching those baby steps, one day we can stand up as a whole. Shifting our paradigm, shifting our perspective on a larger scale. I mean, for me, it's definitely needed. Otherwise, I feel like I'm dying within this world. Like it's a slow death. It's like I'm suffocating. That's the word that comes through. Because I see our potential, and then I also see like where we are lacking, and then I also speak for myself personally. And because then the second piece that you talked about, it's suffering. And I don't know if you remember the scene from the first Matrix movie, where the agent that trying to explain to Neo the first Matrix that they ever created was a perfect Matrix. There was only happy people. There was no suffering. There was no sadness. None of those things in that world. And then they failed. That Matrix failed. For some reason, human beings couldn't survive in that just a pure happy place. It's almost like that suffering. Just give me 1 second. Let me wrap up the start. It's almost like the suffering gives them sense of purpose. So like they can thrive toward happy, and then the suffering happen again, thrive towards happy. So it's just almost like it give them a place to go. So I oftentimes contemplate on that. Is that really true? And yeah, it's something I go back and forth on. It's a conversation I have with a friend yesterday, and sometimes I have. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on all of your thoughts on this matter. But let's.
Okay, the thing is though, that perspective is from the perspective of trying to control humanity and enslave it. It didn't work from that point of view, right? The reason the Matrix failed was not because people were happy, but because people were so able to look around them and so powerful that they didn't feed the Matrix what it needed. Right. So if you're using the story of the Matrix as a metaphor, the reason it failed was because we were powerful enough to fight back. They needed, so in that analogy you're using, the reason they made the suffering was to keep us busy so that we never looked up and challenged. You see? So for me, what I'd say is that the New Age has this whole story in there that, you know, we're made better by our suffering and all that sort of stuff. What if that's not true? What if we just manage our suffering and we get through it really well and we evolve from it? But if there was no sort of, the way things have been set up is so one-sided, there's nothing but suffering, you know, and to the point where we even have to label bad things as good things. We have to constantly fight to find ways to be positive about life. I just think, I'm nearly done, but that analogy you used, the reason the Matrix failed was because it failed to contain our power, it failed to contain our magic, it failed to contain our genius. It failed from the perspective of something horrible controlling everybody and milking them for energy. It didn't fail from the human perspective in that analogy. What do you think?
I think that's a beautiful thing. I haven't actually considered that aspect of that point of view. You know, kind of stand up to the system, because we're all happy. So we're just looking for, okay, what is the next evolution? How can we leap through this? Maybe perhaps that gives them awaken them. But I'm also want to hear the other people's point of view.
I want to tag one thing, and Mono, you said that like there could be this point where the collective hits a point where like a child finally stands up on two legs or whatever. Like you kind of gave that illustration, and I love that, for like humanity could hit a certain level where the paradigm shift of where we kind of like sit up or stand up in a way that we haven't as a whole species. And that's really what I'm interested in speaking to in these conversations, is what we're doing as an entire collective consciousness. And I want to pass it to you, Clara, and I'm curious, from your point of view, is the level of suffering on our planet normal? Or is there a level of, or is there manipulation from your perspective? Are we progressing as a society, or are we self-destructing? Either one of those two questions, or both, I would like to hear.
With your question of whether the level of suffering is normal, it's like a resonating no in my whole body straight away. And it's really interesting that you ask that, because I've been contemplating that question of my own suffering. And I always feel like the individual suffering is sort of this mirror and baseline of the collective suffering in a way. And it made me realize today, just a few hours before the call, how much I am actively promoting my own suffering in my life and literally taking freedom away from myself in situations that I don't have any reason to do so. And it was this really silly example that came up for me there, which was like this morning, I stayed in bed for longer than I wanted. And instead of being understanding and compassionate with myself and just being okay with that my body just obviously needed to catch up on some sleep, I went into, first of all, this need to understand why I had spent so much time in bed. Like, I needed to like logically understand it and explain it to myself. Why have I wasted 2 hours of my life by staying longer in bed instead of getting about my day? And that is completely, it's like, it just occurred to me how nonsensical this suffering is that I'm putting on myself. And it sort of goes into a cycle, because it's like, first of all, I'm trying to find reasons for why I had to stay in bed longer, and go like, well, I obviously needed more sleep and this and this and this. But then I'm getting out of bed and depriving myself of a slow, enjoyable breakfast because I have already wasted 2 hours. And so I'm pushing myself into even more suffering by not giving myself what I need, which is a slow, nice breakfast. And and then I realize that I'm doing that and get angry with myself for punishing for and then it's like a cycle. And I just realized when I was contemplating that earlier, I was like, wow, that is completely self-created suffering for something that, if I take away the need to reason for why I was staying in bed longer than my intention had been, and also taking away the need for my day to look a certain way, like this need that I need to be up by 8 a.m., for example, or that I need to have a slow breakfast as well. That's also one of these. And as soon as I free myself from those, I all of a sudden have freedom not to suffer no matter what happens in my life. And that's like this really small example. Then I don't have to suffer when I stay in bed 2 hours longer than I wanted to. And I also don't have to suffer when I don't have my slow breakfast, because I have freed myself from the need to have these things and from the logical understanding or the logical reasoning for why my life needs to look like this. And then all of a sudden I'm free from suffering. And that's like, yeah, and I feel like that kind of pattern of reasoning and trying to fulfill needs and then trying to explain logically why needs are not, there's so much mind stuff going on that I feel like this is like one of those really small examples from everyday life, but I feel like that's also what's happening on a collective level. It just makes things so, to me it looks like it's like this mass of complications that individuals and the collective put on themselves, which just cause suffering that is self-created and not actually necessary.
Yeah. Those judgments, those constraints, and where are you getting those from? Because we all have them, but like, I don't know, where are they coming from?
To me, it feels like there is a lot of it is upbringing and the societal structures we live in and the systems that are all around us that are so ingrained in behaviors that, and I feel like sometimes it can take quite a lot of energy to make oneself aware of these things that are happening. It's like, for example, my judgment of I have to be out of bed by 8 a.m. because I have stuff to do and da da da. And that's like, that's not something that is coming from love or from my innermost being. That kind of something that are certain rules that I have taken on at some point in my life from something in my surroundings, and I have somehow obviously deemed them important.
So there is, I'm into it. A lot of people are talking about it. There's lots of ways to call it. Energy parasites is one way. Some people call them thought forms. You could think of them as programs moving through the holographic matrix. And there's a huge range, and their job is to feed, to draw energy from humans. This is a theory. I'm into it. And that they can be so subtle and so clever that they can imitate us. And so some of the stuff that we hear in our minds sometimes isn't us. It sounds like us. It's a perfect invitation, but it isn't us. And it draws us into all these any like you're slogging through something your whole life, and you think it's you think it's your own negative self-talk, you think it's your own confusion, and some days you just feel like energies like anger or sadness, and and there definitely is self-work. We are capable of being the reason for all those things, but what if a big part of the story is it isn't us? We don't really feel like that. There's something on us, attached to us, seeing if it can get a response. What if sometimes the thoughts we have, these little arguments in our own head and discussions and the snidey comments that are happening, what if that's not us at all? What if this is some sort of entity that's job is to cause us to lose energy, which is why you felt tired. You literally said, I felt tired. Right? Why I was working on programming my field, because part of that is I'm working on this idea of, well, can I create programming that is like an antivirus?
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe it's not on me. Maybe I'm not. Maybe all this stuff that's happening, you know, all the people that have done so much self-work, so many drug trips, so many dancing around, banging the drum circles, all of the thousands of things that people try to do to fix themselves, and somehow it still hasn't worked. Well, maybe you did fix yourself a long, long time ago. This is something that isn't you. It needs fixing. It needs an approach. It needs an awareness. It needs a response. But maybe it isn't even us some of the time.
Yeah, I like that perspective, Lex. I think we all know that the phrase like the hundredth monkey effect or whatever, right? And we usually think of that about like good things, you know, like good habits or something spread quickly after enough humans or mammals or primates pick it up. It'll kind of spread through the collective conscious quickly, and everybody will just get it. But I would say there's probably something similar for negative patterns as well, that they, you know, if they're prevalent enough through society, we're all feeling them. Like it might not be our own mojo or whatever to worry about something or judge ourselves, but if we walk into a space and there's like 10,000 eyes on us, like looking critically at something, then we like, oh, this is not feeling acceptable in this space. And then we're worried, like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be acceptable how I am. And then we start to take on all the societal structures. And then my question now is, who did set up the society structures that we're currently living in? I feel like it's implied that we have organically created them, but I don't believe that to be so. And I'm curious what each of you think.
For me, when I look at a societal structure, it almost like a being chooses not to take full responsibility and decided to pass on the responsibility. It's like, I don't want to take responsibility for myself, but I'd rather just give you the role. Like it's almost like we elected someone, take care of this because this is too much. I think it really comes back down to like a taking responsibility for our thoughts, our feeling, or like whatever it's moving through. Because I look at it as it's the first form to transmute or transform anything. And I believe that if each being were to take more of that responsibility, we may not need, I mean, we would still have this system, but I have a feeling that we would have a more, I guess, what the word is that, like a more concrete or like a more aligned base system. Because even the system, which is like a human beings who are controlling the system, um, would take responsibility for all aspects of it. The other day I was walking down the street, right? And at the end of the street, there was like a big puddle of water, like out of nowhere. And I was like, where does this come from? And then the other day I was also walking down, still see the puddle. It didn't even rain, you know, for like several days. Where's this puddle coming from? And several days ago, I was walking down the same road, but it was like a late at night. It was like a midnight or something. I was walking the dog, kind of checking out the area, and all of a sudden I see that there is this sprinkler system that's set up, and there was a big crack on the pipe, and there's like so much water that's leaking. And I was just thinking, oh my god, look at the amount of water that's leaking on a daily basis, that's creating this like a massive puddle, and nobody's doing anything about it. Like, I don't even know if anyone knows anything about it. Like, and I asked myself, am I willing to do something about it? I mean, I took a video and I had this like a great thought in my head going, I'm gonna call the city, or like I'm gonna tell my uncle, because he's the resident here, so, and he can call the city. And then I showed it to him. He didn't do anything about it. I didn't do anything about it. And I was just like, I think I played my part. I'm just a temporary person here. But you know, it's again coming back to that, taking responsibility all around, and not just like a passing the ball. It's like a feeling victim, or like a feeling powerless, but still doing the little thing. Even though I'm here temporarily, what if I call the system? Like, what if I call the city and just tell them, hey, there's this leak happening on the street. Are you able to do something about it? Just the little things, right? So I think that's kind of my perspective. I'm curious to hear the rest of the people. What are your thoughts?
I'm really curious to hear Shane's perspective, because it
giving you
sounded like the way you
space if you
asked
want
the
to go on.
questions made me think like, oh, I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting, Mono. You say like, you know, call the city and have them do something about it, but and I think that's a slippery slope there of like, again, believing that we built the structures that we're living in, I think, is a deception.
What do you mean by that?
You know, I would say take the United States of America. You're like, oh, we built this free nation of the democracy, and we got together and we, you know, made the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, and we did this. They're like, who is we? Who is we did that? Like, you look on the back of the $100 bill, there's like 50 men there. Like are they your parents? Like, are any of your mothers there? Like, I don't think they made any of the rules, because it looks like it's only men doing that. And like, was it the native people of the land? Like who was it? Who was it? You know, and that's just the story we're given. But these institutions, they go back hundreds of years. We didn't decide on anything. We didn't just say like, hey, let me have a government that requires me to hand them tax money. That wasn't my idea. I didn't come up with it. I didn't create it or ask for it to be created. And if you're ever curious of whether that government was built by you for you or not, ask for transparency. But you will not get it anywhere. You don't have a voice to ask for it, because it's, you didn't create it, and it's not for you, and it's not by you, and it didn't birth from you, and it's not doing what you asked it to do, or it's not doing what you want it to do, and it's not working for you. You're working for it, and there's zero transparency on like, all they would have to do is show us where the money goes. But they do not. They don't tell us who makes the decisions to bomb a country, assassinate someone, do a secret, top secret mission. Who decides what's top secret? We start asking these questions, you realize like, you didn't create this government. You don't even know what that government is. You don't know how many levels there are to that government, how many compartments and departments there are of that. Even if you worked for them your whole life, you still don't know. Seriously, ask anybody that spent a lifetime in the military, a lifetime as a politician. You don't know anything what's happening next door or above you or below you or beside you. And what little bit that you got to wear your blinders and do, you had to sign papers that if you talk to anybody about this, including your lovers, your family members, they may kill you and may kill your family members. Ask them about that. That's why they don't say anything, because they're under threat of their own life and their families' lives to not speak their truth. And there's no conspiracy theory about this. You can go and ask anybody right now. They'll be, can't say it because of a black magic contract that puts a word, national security, this or that. We don't tell anybody anything. We lie to everybody about everything. We have secret bases, secret weapons, secret this, secret that, secret none of your business how much of your money we spend however we want to spend it. And heaven forbid you don't obey, we're going to send our programmed armed thugs to haul you away and put you somewhere where you don't have access to. You can go to the front door of a system and knock on the door and begin a legal process that may take the rest of your life to find out where your family members locked away, if they're alive. Like, you don't have access to anything. You didn't create this for yourself. You didn't dream this up for yourself and say, I would create this. Like, if it didn't exist, would you birth it right now? That's the question. You were born here. If you did not create it, question who did. Can you meet them? Can you speak with them? Did you agree to it? Does it really represent what you believe? You don't really need to know any more details than that. Yeah, Lex.
So I would put it like this. Have you guys heard of loosh? It's a word that people made up to describe an idea. Loosh? Anyone heard of that?
How do you spell that?
Well, I mean, Loosh, I guess. It's a name. It's just a word that somebody made up to describe something. Human energy being taken by something that feeds on human energy. It's quite it's got traction. There's a huge amount of people that talk about it, and it goes through history. All the religions and cultures talk about a lot of the religions and cultures talk about it. The Gnostics talk about it, the knowers, and so spirituality in recent times has been about working on yourself, becoming the best you, being in good health, having a positive attitude, shining the light, feeling love, being in a high frequency, all that sort of stuff. And all of that is awesome. But the bit that people aren't sort of doing that as well as is seeing potentially this other part of the story, which is that the world is actually being run by the opposite of that, by dark people, dark magicians, dark spiritual people, and that the chaos and the disorder, the poverty, the misery, all of that stuff that's supposed to be labeled as human error and that humans are inherently a bit crap isn't true at all. Actually, humans are amazing, beautiful, genius magicians who are under a spell created by dark magic workers, and we're so used to it, it's so generational, that we take this hideous, horrible horror place and say, turn it in and translate it into positive upspeak, and we're always in a good mood and we bounce around and how you doing, good day, blah 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 blah. But it's a kind of a sort of a delusion, like it's not authentic, right? So where it gets really difficult is you see all of that, you check it out, you feel into it, and then you come as somebody who wakes up every morning and tries to smile to people and tries to give positive energy and hug people when they need it and shit and all that sort of stuff. whilst also knowing how that sits in the story, the real story. So Loosh is the name given to the energy we lose every time we're a bit frustrated, a bit sad, a bit scared, every time something in the world devastates us. And we have been, this is my thoughts, we've been trained to the point where we're constantly hemorrhaging Loosh into the world. But we've been so made so used to it that we don't even notice anymore. We think that is, we get through the day hemorrhaging this energy and being positive about it.
Would Mano, you or Claire like to weigh in on whether you believe that there's a small percent of the population manipulating a larger percent?
I mean, I can speak for the manipulation aspect of it. I definitely believe that there's a deep layers of manipulation that goes around in the world. That's, comes back to human control, keeping humanity in this loop. But it is fascinating for me to hear about the Loosh. I don't think I've heard of that term before, or it was a really good explanation, Lux. And also Shane's sharing, I've obviously had similar perspective on that. And hearing that again, the way, you're explaining it, brought like a more perspective into some of the thoughts that I've had. But almost like I do notice for myself, I try not to, I don't know, go down that road at all. For me, it creates a level of like darkness within me. It's this sadness that I feel, like a lack of control, if I can use that word, like a lack of control. Yeah, yeah, but it's like more sadness that brings within me, just to even like thinking that, because I have this such a utopian idea of the earth, of humanity is always holding the higher light. But it almost like this innocence that's within me, it's like, yeah, maybe it exists, it's like just trying to pass that so that I can go on with my life. Now I feel like I'm being dragged down by that energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What do you think is in between the innocence of and beauty of humanity from being fully expressed on the planet right now?
What's that?
What do you think's in between like the innocence and beauty of humanity from being fully expressed on the planet right now?
I think it's like a lack of love, for oneself. It kind of relates back to the story that Clara was like sharing earlier. Our inner chatter in our mind being so upset or angry, rather than being like a forgiveness, and trying to triumph that. I feel like that is the piece that's missing. That's like, if you can, even if you do something wrong, to be able to love ourselves. Hey, I did this wrong. But knowing that I'm moving towards something better or something greater, just having that trust to triumph or to move past that piece. I think that's what I believe. What about yourself, Clara?
What comes up for me is really the aspect of simplicity versus complexity as well, especially in these systems. It's like that the question that popped up as well for me was like, these systems and structures, aside from the question of who created them, and clearly it wasn't me, and clearly I didn't choose this, it's also even like the question that comes up is like, what even is it right now? Because it feels like, to me, it's like, or as what do we collectively and individually treat it? Because it feels like it's almost as if, to an extent, many have moved into some kind of weird relationship with it in this sense of like that it's become more than what it actually is, almost like it's like this entity in itself that has started to develop or grow or change. And it's like it feels really really icky and creepy and scary actually inside of me when I feel into it like that, because it feels like there's almost this mechanic robotic complexity, and that the complexity of it is almost what's the very thing that is in the way of us dissolving it into something that's serving us. Because it feels like if it's almost like, and it feels like I encounter that every day with German bureaucracy. It's like the perfect example for complexity literally stopping life from unfolding. It's like, this is not serving life. It's like the amount of bureaucracy you have to go through for any stupid something, and the bureaucratic loops you end up finding yourself into, like loops of impossibility that are simply not serving life. And it's the exact same pattern that I encountered this morning with myself. It's like that's, I'm creating complexity in my own life that is not serving my own life. And I feel like as a collective, that's exactly what's happening on the government levels, on the structural levels, on the societal levels, that it's like, in order to try to feel more safe and to create safety, it's like we end up creating complexity that actually makes us unsafe. But it's like this loop. And instead of, it feels like one of the big, what you just said, Manu, with the love, that's like, that feels like to me like that's the baseline of it all. And then simplicity and the implementation of simplicity through love is like, yeah, I'm not sure how to put this right, but it feels like simplicity and striving for simplicity is one of the, to me, it feels like is one of the points to enter into something new and to enter into change.
Yeah. Well said, Clara. I like it.
Yeah, and you know, like when you're sharing this, I'm keep thinking of a maze. It's almost like the complexity, because I remember German bureaucracy trying to get my visa when I was living there. It was like a one loop after the other, even to get my address right. I was like, forget it. Like I sent like a 4 mail to like a 4 different people. It was something else. So when I look at this, like, you know, complexity, it's almost like we created to trap the mind. You have to jump through all these loophole, and all of that costs money. That's like a more money for the government. Um, yeah, I mean, like that. I guess it's kind of brings back like what Shane was sharing. Like, so is it then come back down to like a following, tracing the money? But I guess what, for me, what feels like that paralyzes me is like a what is it that I can do? What is it that we can do to change the system or shift the system? And if that's the case, I think that's kind of the whole point of this conversation, is like, how do we change the system? What system can we create to replace the existing one?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's something I'm curious. So I'm curious, Shane, like, do you have a solution? I mean, not to mean to put you in the right on the spot, you know, not to come up with something, but I'm wondering if there's something that has come through you, or something that's very present.
I have a couple questions to ask for that, to like, instead of just giving the solution. But Lex, go ahead. You have a thought you want to share?
So treating any problem requires investigation and discerning and finding the issue. And for me, the issue is that there are aspects of reality which are mechanical, and when they present in humans, we call that psychopathic. So the human component is psychopathic, I would say. That's my description. And then the way they've created the world, they've created sociopathy, right? So people have learned a behavior which is psychopathic. It's still changeable, right? It's a programming of psychopathy rather than it's the software. So a sociopath is a software issue, A psychopath is generally literally a physical issue. There are parts of the brain that aren't connected. And I think that the problem we've got is that at the brain level, mind level, they've managed to train people into the left brain, and the left brain machinery performs in a certain way. And it's not big picture, and it's not locked into emotion, and it doesn't connect to the heart, I would say. This is only my way of thinking about it, right? So what we've got is people who aren't feeling emotions. None of their right brain is involved. No imagination, no creativity, no big picture. And so if you take that and the heart out, what you're left with is literally a machine. And I think that there are also non-physical elements, which we call demons. So di means way and mon means singular. And demon can mean a lot of things. It's not just a leathery thing with wings. It means one point of view, something extreme. And these human versions, they're demons because they are left brain only. And that presented itself all the way through history. But an obvious one to say would be SS, Nazi officers. That is a very left brain person. So maybe the right brain is capable of coming online, but it isn't online, right? They're psychopathic. They've got no heart, and they'll do terrible things, but they'll audit everything. They'll make a note of every single person they kill. They'll make a note of every bit of clothing, right? They're like, machines. And I think that demons are also non-physical, and that they are aspects of reality which are underdeveloped, and they're not divine. And I think that we're constructed from something divine, which is 2 lines of code. Di means 2, vine, you know what vines are like, they spiral around. It comes into our DNA as the 2 lines of helix. Estrogen, testosterone express itself in loads of ways, but it also divine is when our consciousness from source goes through heart into mind in hemisync, both aspects. We get the creation, the imagination, big picture, but we also get the day-to-day, taking care of business, weighing things, measuring things, getting things right, knowing how long something will take. You put those things together and you can do brilliant, creative, artistic architectures into the world. You can do magic. You can change things beautifully. So not only do we have a problem with psychopaths, but I think that if you only have the right side of the brain, you struggle to show up on time. You struggle to turn your creative visions into actuality and bring them into the world. It remains a dream. It remains a fantasy. So what I see is that we've got, at the moment in the world, we've got a hard left and a hard right being corralled into right brain only with no left brain, which means that none of that beautiful, lovely, heart-based, wonderful intention actualizes. And then on the left, and then the people that are actualizing, only actualizing, are doing it heartlessly and with no imagination. And that's what I see happening in the world. And it's a conversation that I think everyone needs to have, because the true healing of this planet is to get the heart online from source with consciousness into hemisync. And that is how I think we fix everything. It would be instantaneous. There you go, my thoughts.
Yeah, love it, Lex. I feel like maybe Claire, with your share earlier, you said something to the effect of like trying to, like, you're judging yourself for sleeping in, and then like you needed a reason to like, you're trying to like analyze it, or like what's the word, like give it a diagnosis of why, or something like that. Like, and maybe that's like what Lex is speaking to, this like left brain analyticals of like needing it to make sense. It's got to have a reason. It's got to do this, instead of just flowing without explanation, maybe, or something like that. Like letting those 2 things dance together. And yeah, I would agree, Lex. It's left brain, right brain, masculine, feminine. The merging of these things is what is being asked of us. The 2 questions I was wanting to speak to, Mono, when you asked me, and we'll see if we can bring all this information together, is my first question is, do the governments, powers, authorities, because I don't even say the governments are almost, to me, the frontline soldiers implementing the structure of some people behind the scenes that are simply put, the ones with the money. Not only the ones with the money, the ones who created the money system that we use. Who are those people? Because they're not under the dollar. They built the dollar and told you to use it. And we all use it and hand it back to them. And there's no secret that there's 1 or 2% of the world's population has all the wealth, equal to greater than the other 98%. And so without a conspiracy theory, there's selfish interest at stake, setting programs for the entire planet. Now, my question would be, out to the three of you, do the governments require our belief in them? Do the authorities, quote unquote, self-appointed leaders, the corporate or money holders or wealth holders, I'll say, on the planet, do they require our belief in them to hold power? Because you asked me, Mano, how do we get out of it? What do we do? I'll ask that first.
What's that?
I just asked that question. Do they do they need us to believe in them? What if we do not believe in them? What happens?
I think like as soon as we stop believing in them, it loses value, right? It's just like with anything. If you don't believe in the stock market, the stocks fall because we don't invest money in it. We don't believe in the government, thinking that we can either self-govern or do things for ourselves. They can obviously try their best to enforce more of those rules, trying to control. But as we lose our trust in this system, we won't be using dollar as much, or we'd be doing things differently. Maybe we'll go back to the trading systems, like, hey, I have this, we'll exchange it for something. But within the system, I had this conversation with my uncle, right? He's an engineer, like a very, aware. He's done some work. He's on the path to a certain degree, but he's very, much in the system at the same time. But I do feel that we still need some sort of a monetary system where we can exchange good for services, right? Like good and services. I guess that's a piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to work toward, or working on. What would that look like? I mean, living in a community was simple to so many degrees. We weren't each person were living in a separate structure, where each of those structures were paying income tax or a property tax, all those little things. All of that, again, goes back to the thing, and it's a form of control, and knowing how many people are living there, how much each person are using, all those things, right? And yeah, and those are the questions that I'm trying to answer. How do we simplify the system enough that we can overrule it, or create change? Because of the complexity, I feel like sometimes I'm trapped in the maze of that complexity, similar to what Clara was talking about earlier. Clara, any thoughts on this?
Yes, it's really interesting, because I think the question that comes up for me is how big the aspect of believing in it is, which I'm sure definitely plays a role. But to me, it feels like this extent to which we continue playing its or their game. Do we play on the same, almost if you wanted to talk to it in a sense of frequency, for example, when I engage with German bureaucracy, how do I do it? From what point do I do it? Do I sort of adjust and play their game by going into the same frequency in that sense, or the same way of doing things? Or how can I, as an individual, bring something new into this, which does not necessarily mean me having to break the law or do something illegal, or whatever, refuse to pay tax or some things like that. It's like, how can I be in the system in a way that serves myself right now in this moment and serves my life right now in this moment without putting me into like really into suffering basically in this point of human existence that I have right now. But how can I still affect change through the presence I bring into it? And I think that's one of those questions that's really big for me, because I feel like, how many times have I just dreamt of whatever, exiting everything and moving into the woods and become like a self-sufficient person living in a cabin in the woods and never talking to anybody again, or how do I exist within? Yeah, and that kind of brings back to this. I think it's like one of the things we've discussed in one of the previous calls, like this question, like, to what extent do I need to be in the system to change the system, or do I need to be outside of the system to change the system? Or is there a right answer? Is there maybe people who will do best outside of the system and changing it from the outside, and some others will be best placed inside and changing it from the inside? Maybe it doesn't even matter. And I'm always thinking that maybe there is also an answer that is to all of these questions, and also an answer to change that is just simply so different to anything that I can imagine right now, that that's always my answer to the money question. Because I'm like, as you say, man, I was like playing with this, like, and asking these questions, and I'm always thinking, like, I think the answer is something that is so unimaginable, that is so completely different to anything we know right now, that right now, for my current self at this point, the best thing I can do is to open up to something so crazy and so different and so unimaginable, that within that complete unknown will be an answer that is just not imaginable for my brain right now. That's the hope I'm having, that there is something out there that is so insane to my current perspective and my current me, that yeah, but that one day I will be able to grasp that and see that.
Exactly, Claire. I think that's it. Like, I don't mean to put pressure on the individual to like take some huge stand against the entire globe, but I think we will do it in mass as a collective. And like Mano, you said earlier tonight, and I liked it where you talked about like us as a species standing up on two legs kind of thing, like when we do that in mass, I think that is the magical extra element that is beyond. We don't have to come up with like a 3D, like third dimensional physical, like how do we change the money to get out from underneath this thing? Like, I don't think it happens quite that physical level. I think it happens through like awakening of a group consciousness to where we see, and this is my understanding of the great awakening that I believe is happening right now and we are going through. And what the awakening is seeing truth and clarity, seeing transparently what really is. And what is collapsing globally right now, well, not immediately, but it's already begun to collapse, is all the lies. All that which pretends to be something that it is not is going to be revealed, and we will be awakened to see with our eyes the things that we have been deceived about. And the more we see these deceptions coming clear, the people who were using the deception to wield influence and power and control will no longer be able to do so, because we will see it for the manipulation that it is, and we'll no longer hand ourselves over. And I think we have to do this as one whole species, whether we do it as every individual or we just do it as a certain percentage of a group consciousness planet wide. There will be like a species level awakening that sees through that and exits it, and will never agree to surrender its autonomy and sovereignty and authority over to an enslaved system. That's my perspective on that. And this is my understanding of what we're evolving through and moving into, and that it doesn't fall on any one of us individually to solve it, but we raise awareness and connect consciousness, and as a group species we will detach from that which seeks to bind or hold down. And that's my understanding. And
It's really beautiful, the way how you share that piece. I think it also, like, takes away the pressure from like one individual to come up with this massive solution. And I also resonate with how it is a collective approach. Enough of us. It's coming back to the 100 monkey theory, we just talked about. Yeah, so that it's a rapid movement, because we have to test it out, see if it makes sense, if it works. I do definitely have the tendency of trying to bring everything back to the 3D. I may be existing across the plane, but the current physical body is in the 3D plane. So yeah, and I don't know if today is the time, but I'd love to jump into the concept of the aliens, especially with all the UFOs being shot down, all those things. Maybe let me know, like, if that's something we want to dive into tonight, or if that's something we can say that for the next conversation too.
I think it's a big topic, and I would love to talk about it. And I think it would take an entire evening to speak to it directly. And I feel like we're at the close of our energy for tonight. And I would like to kind of go ahead and wrap up tonight's conversation by moving into that final phase where we do a channeling of the higher self, so that we take a minute of silence to get really present with everything that's gone down since we've come on camera here tonight. Breathe into it, both what we spoke, what we heard each other speak, and maybe what we're looking for is a kind of a spirit's voice that was speaking through all four of us tonight, or that was an energy that's maybe crying out to a bigger population, but it's coming through our mouths tonight. And if we can take a minute to channel our higher self and try to grasp the energetics of what's happening here in this last hour and a half, and see if we can condense it a bit to speak to its essence in a few words. And if any other message from the higher self feels like it wants to come through to add completion to the conversation, I invite you to bring that through as well. Just take a minute to get centered. You feel you have your clarity, go ahead and speak.
What's moving through me is to listen, hear with your heart, and accept what's moving through, what's coming up. And listen to the truth of your being. Listen to the truth of your calling. And each moment, each day, take one step closer to your heart's desire. Things may seem impossible or distant or hard to reach, but each of those steps that you take from the courage from your heart bring you closer to where you need to be. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mano.
What moves through me is a feeling of clarity and knowing that even though there is darkness and structures and things that we encounter that are not serving life, and it is valuable to acknowledge that, there is this really deep knowing and trust that there is nothing to fear, because change is already happening to, I think, a much greater extent than we see playing out in the 3D world around us. I think there is so much beauty underway already. And the love that is bringing all of this change and creativity and beauty about is so much stronger than anything that is not love. And its service to life is so much bigger and so much more potent than anything that is not serving life. That deep within, I know that there is nothing to worry about. We can't go wrong. There is this deep trust in life.
I don't have anything to contribute this week, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. It's very sweetly said, Clara. What I pulled through was that we're all kind of sharing some inner knowings that speak to a truth that's so deep that even when the outer world is not matching up, we still know the inner knowing to be more accurate. And that we are seeking, striving to see how that inner knowing can and will play out, and how we will let it move through us or be moved by it. There seems to be yearning and longing and desire in all of us. An appetite of sorts that's not fully quenched yet. And I'm hearing that in our conversation tonight. And even as you wrapped it up, Clara, there is optimism and confidence and trust in that innocence and beauty that is there. I hear that coming through everyone's voice tonight as well. And I see a nice tapestry of perspective in our small four, holding down different colors of reality that are getting us maybe closer to a full color picture of what's happening, hopefully. My heart feels good to be able to speak to some of these things, to take a minute to feel into it, and to give voice to it, to ask these questions, to hear your answers. I'm really grateful for each of you being here together on this episode again. And thank you for bringing your truth. Thank you for being brave enough to show up and be recorded and speak it. And if any of you have anything you'd like to say before we bring our video to a close, to say goodnight, feel free to voice it now.
It's beautiful to see you all. Very grateful for this conversation and all the clarity that came through each of you. Thank you for the fantastic question and the beautiful hosting, Shane. It's nice to have Clara. Lex always a thing. I really resonate with like a lot of you sharing today. Yeah, so that's really powerful stuff. Thank you.
I liked being here. You guys, sitting with you guys felt really nice. And Shane, you're getting good at this.
Thank you. Maybe another 100 episodes. We're getting our rhythm of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was just beautiful, and I just loved everybody's shares, and it just really feels like it's really lighting something up within me and in the whole room. And there's one thing I would love to share, what I just experienced through the minute of silence now at the end. It was really, I felt so centered and so clear. And opening my eyes again and just looking at the screen and looking at all of your faces, it's just such a blessing. And I just felt like that we were just talking about the beauty of life. And I feel like it was just expressing in each and every one of your faces. And I just loved seeing that. And I just thought, this is literally the beauty of life right here. So it's like, and this is the optimism, the trust, the love, the hope, the knowing that the evolution is happening, and that even though we carry the responsibility to make it happen at the same time, and I feel like that's this beautiful paradox of it all, it will happen anyway. It's like it will happen. There is no doubt about it. It cannot not happen at the same time. We have the responsibility for it, but it also cannot not happen. And within that lies so much beauty and so much play as well, and like an invitation for us to play. And I feel like that's one of those things we are doing on a soul level, literally in these calls, is to play with the beauty of being human and with the beauty of being alive and with the potential that brings. And that's really what I felt today. It felt full of potential, it felt full of play, and it felt full of light for my soul to be here with all of you and experience being human in this beautiful way. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you for that positive, inspiring note to bring our evening to a close. And I want to thank everyone who takes the time to listen to this video all the way through. And this video and all others, please feel free to comment on, ask questions, leave a message somewhere, speak to, what part about this conversation resonated with you. Write down what you feel like wasn't said that could have been mentioned. Write your questions of what you would like to see discussed. Like, what do you feel is the most important topic for us to be addressing right now? And I would love feedback from a greater audience. We record this for the sharing, so thank you. And we look forward to having you all here again. And we'll say good night for now.